So we are going to talk about options that are outside selling direct to consumers and to farmers markets today. So who I am, my name is Taryn DeWitt. I own an organization called Taloma. We focus on all the in-betweens between farm and table, so the logistics, the marketing, the food safety. Don't ask me how to grow anything, but if you need to sell it, that's where I can help. I spent 12 years at Frontier Produce, a wholesale food distributor with 2 large warehouses in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. The company sold in July. It's still operating, it's still great, but I felt like that was a really good time for me to make this transition. My background is mostly in selling to school systems, and so that is where I've really started with the local foods. There has been some really incredible grants to kind of help move that along, and then food safety. So I've done food safety for 12 years. I was going through about 7 or 8 audits a year from the FDA, the USDA, third parties. We'd have companies like Chick-fil-A and Arby's and stuff like that come into our warehouse and make sure we're safe. Okay, so that is why I'm qualified. Okay, so this was kind of the question I just asked. Who has experience selling outside of a farmer's market? Who has experience selling wholesale? Okay, so it's okay if that has been hard, okay, because we are last. So Oklahoma is ranked 50th in local food infrastructure. So if you are curious on why you don't see local food in grocery stores very often, or why it's hard to sell to a restaurant, why you don't see local food in your kid's school is because we haven't done a good job of that. But it is getting a lot better. There are tons of organizations, nonprofits, federal funding, all sorts of things. People like you all are doing really, really good work to solve these problems. So if you've been exhausted by this idea before, there's a lot of effort putting into to make it a lot easier in the next few years. Okay, so here are some of the things that we are going to talk about. Each one of these has a different approach. So what I recommend that you all do is just pick a couple of them, because each one of them has a different marketing side. Each one of them wants something a little bit different. So we're going to kind of dive into some examples, and then that will allow you all to realize maybe something that aligns with how you want to grow. Do you want to have 10 employees? Are you happy for just being yourself? What do you want to do with that? So I think there's a couple creative things now that will be fun to talk about. Okay, so here are some of the main distributors in Oklahoma. Everyone but the Oklahoma City Food Hub, which exists to buy local. None of these people do much with local food. Like, the only thing that Frontier was buying until I started this initiative was mushrooms from J&M Mushrooms. And that's pretty easy because they sell to like 8 states, and that was just sort of part of it. So why not buy mushrooms that were basically like 40 minutes away from us, that were at a super cheap price point, right? Because they're massive. So getting into distributor is sort of the ultimate goal, right? So that's not where we're not going to start here. We're not going to call FreshPoint and say that you have 4 pounds of basil that you would love to sell them. They're not going to listen to you. But this is, if you are interested in growing, we have 3 farmers that are at Frontier now that are pumping through, and I'll talk about that later, like we buy stuff from California. They're going to care about food safety, which we'll touch on a little bit. They help a lot with logistics, so that's one thing they can do. If you do get bigger and you need to get from A to B, there's trucks going around everywhere. If they're already getting pretty close to you, there's a pretty good chance that they'll give you an affordable rate and save you from driving maybe 3 hours to something, right? And then we're going to talk about stock versus special orders. So when you get an item stocked, that means that they are buying depending on what they think their customers are going to buy. So, okay, I'm going to buy 8 cases of local cantaloupe every single week, and I think I'm going to sell it, but I don't know who's going to buy it. That's awesome. Most of the time, it's going to be a special order. So the customer is going to buy, they're going to say, hey, I want that cantaloupe. And then the distributor is going to call that farmer and say, hey, I'm going to buy this, and it's going to get delivered on this day. So there's no skin in the game, right? If that product's not going to sit there for a week and go bad, and then they've lost that profit. So the special order is sort of where we are right now with the goal of stocking stuff just like they would stock any other item. Okay, so this is what I've been working on for the past year. I'll say who it is. So Acadian Farms in Fort Cobb. We've been working with Rod for about a year now. It was steady growth. We were picking up from his farm. He decided that he didn't want to do any of the distribution himself anymore. He's having truck problems. We said, we are close enough to you. We'll go pick up the stuff. We bring it back to our Oklahoma City warehouse and then distribute it from there. The past 2 weeks, the driver was like smashing stuff into our gigantic box trucks because he had that much product that had already been sold. Frontier had not bought any of that, but we had it and he only was selling to 2 school districts, 5 to 7 grocery stores depending on the week, and then like a pallet to the Tulsa Food Bank. And so he doesn't have that many customers. He's not spending hours and hours a week haggling and trying to get people to buy from him. It's consistent ordering, and he's getting a full truckload of his stuff shipped out, and we're distributing it for him. And a similar thing happened with a lettuce farm in Tulsa. Now the school districts are kind of buying up more. They only had about 4 school districts, but we were picking up an entire truckload of butterhead lettuce and distributing it. So things like this are happening now. So if that seems interesting to you, there are ways to do it, okay? These farms are not cheap. Like, I don't know, like when I see their prices and I see conventional prices, I'm like, there's no way anyone's gonna buy your stuff. But they are, and it's awesome, and they're buying it consistently. This is just like a fun thing to maybe take a screenshot of if you do grow any kind of produce. This is the standard wholesale pricing of everything, right? And it's all over the board. And so this is like a good example of when I see stuff from a farmer and they're selling it by the 15 pounds, but it's really the standard's 20 pounds. And I know when they go to a school or a restaurant and try to approach them, all those restaurants are going to go, I don't understand this math. I don't know if this is a good price or bad price. And so the more you can angle it towards these standard prices, that this is just sort of across the board what you're going to see in a distribution center, the better. Okay? So items to consider. So these are some of the items that when I look at the conventional prices, they're about 20% higher. Sometimes we're looking at like zucchini is sometimes 300% higher, like local organic zucchini versus like conventional zucchini. And so if you feel like you have extra stuff like that you're trying to sell and it didn't move, it's probably because the price difference is a lot more than some of the other things. Okra is really because okra doesn't have a great shelf life. It is very high to buy it conventionally because they know that most of it's going to go to waste. So okra is a great option. Herbs are a great option. I wanted to show stuff like this is so confusing for a normal farmer. Cilantro and parsley are always by the 3 count, the 30 count, or 60 count bundles, right? But all other herbs are by the 1 pound. So cilantro and parsley on a standard, like selling to a restaurant, is usually not profitable because it's a pretty hefty amount and it's really, really cheap versus something like basil or rosemary or mint. Those have a really high price. You're almost guaranteed to however you're growing that you can compete with the typical distribution prices because those herbs are flown in. And so the cost to get those flown in are really, really high. So other items, just anything that you don't see at a regular grocery store. The slightly different variations of anything is just such a good opportunity So it's different colors of things, different things from different cultures. Elizabeth and I were talking about that. That's really where you can put whatever markup you want because there's really not another comparison, right? And so thinking about as you're considering what you're going to produce each year, leaning more into a little bit of the experimentation because that's where you're going to have some pretty fun movement. And I think that's where you'll find some uniqueness where people remember you that you grew something that they wouldn't have access to elsewhere. Okay. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. So talking about schools. They haven't decided the date yet, but there is a state, I guess it's still considered a grant. It used to be a federal program, now it's a state level program. It's going to be $4 million a year where schools can apply to buy local food, and that includes produce, includes meat, includes dairy, a couple other things. And they apply for, I think, between $5,000 and $20,000. They can buy local and then they get reimbursed. I mean, that is incredible. So we had that program for a couple years. It took a while for schools to really understand it, but once it, did you?
We haven't done it, but a neighbor did it with Quinton School.
Mm-hmm.
It's a new deal. Nobody knows, but if you can kind of hold each other's hands through the process, I mean, they provided, I think, almost 3,000 pounds of single animal source, good quality ground beef for those kids.
Going to kids. I mean, it's pretty cool. And ground beef is a really, really good example because it's easy to freeze. It's a higher price item, so you can use it for a long time. So that is coming back. There was a gap between the federal funding and the state funding. So in 2025, that will be available again. It'll be really easy for everyone to apply. It's just getting the schools to know that it exists. And so as you live in different communities, think about how many smaller districts are where you are and around you, and think about how much money that can bring you without you needing to rent a truck or like worry about logistics and all that. That can be managed through that. So I'm sure OLAC will communicate that as we finalize all the details. But that's something that I really, really think is going to be completely game changing. As you're trying to reach out to schools, you can ask me. I know a good chunk of the school districts, but who you're looking for when you Google stuff, you're looking for the school nutrition director. That person will sort of be the ultimate. You need. It's most likely going to be female, like 90% female. You need to make sure she likes you. She's on board. And then sometimes a smaller school district, you can even contact the superintendent. I found a superintendent on LinkedIn. I messaged him and we got it going. So there's ways to be, you can think about 3 or 4 school districts that you want to get started with and just try to find someone. Or you find someone who has kids at that school and then you just ask who the higher up until you have a conversation with them, okay? And even in school board meetings, most people don't know that no one's buying local food. Everyone assumes that the produce and the meat that we have, that portion of it's local, and most of it isn't. So getting access to a school board meeting and saying, hey, don't you want to be supporting your community? This is a really easy way to do so. So if you can't tell, schools are my favorite option to start with wholesale. And they also have decent budgets.
I was going to say, it's so good for the school budget.
Yes.
They're not spending all that money on the produce.
Yes, exactly. So it's a win-win. Okay, restaurants. This is harder, but it's also a lot of fun, right? To be able to brag that you have food at one of your favorite restaurants, right? So I have a couple tips for that. You're gonna talk to, if it's a smaller restaurant, the owner, the kitchen manager, the kitchen manager is gonna be the one placing the order. So if they're not on board, they're gonna go the easiest route possible. So you need to try to find time to talk to them, because otherwise they're just gonna keep buying from Cisco, right? And then you wanna find out when they place their order. So if their cutoff time is on Tuesday at 3 p.m., that you need to make sure that they have your availability with plenty of time to make that decision. Because if they text you Tuesday morning, hey, what do you got? And you reply Tuesday at 4 p.m., you're basically out that whole week. So asking that question is really, really important. I've suggested that to a lot of farmers, and that has worked out really well because then you can get them to start to think. Find places that make sense for you to deliver. There are logistic options, but I think the best thing to do, especially to continue that relationship at first, once you pick up 4 or 5 restaurants, then you can figure out some other options. But hand delivering something and developing a friendship with that restaurant is going to make them where they're going to consistently buy from you. Okay? Start with independent restaurants. Payway is not going to buy from you. Red Lobster is not going to buy from you. A House Smith restaurant that has, there are 80 of them, that's going to be a corporate decision for them to commit to you. So if you don't know if someone's an independent, kind of Google it. You can kind of, maybe at the bottom of their website, they'll say that, hey, they're owned by this restaurant group. But sometimes even like 3 or 4 restaurants all owned by the same person, that's going to take some time to get into. That's going to be incredible if you do, but understand that might not be the first pitch. You might want to start with something that you're talking to the owner who's also the general manager who also works there 5 or 6 days a week. Okay? Caterers are a really, really good option because what they can do is they can suggest more seasonal items, right? Caterers, the menus aren't set. They can have some fun with it. And so they can say, okay, well, for $5 more a person, we can have local food. So if there's a cool event, you think about how many so catering, yes, like wedding, but you're also talking about like corporate functions or something like this. How many big oil and gas companies are spending thousands of dollars on a luncheon? And if you can get in with the caterer and now have local food, isn't that a cooler story than just a regular, lunch? Okay. Look at their menu. Walk in with ideas of things that you can replace that are conventional, that are local. Places that have like a chalkboard menu, some kind of daily or weekly change. So you go into a restaurant, right, and they go, okay, the special is chicken and it has this special or whatever. Most of the time, they don't even tell you that price, right? And then you just kind of get surprised when you're like, dang, I didn't realize that was like $45. But what that does is them telling you that spiel. If you can't deliver the carrots, it's not a huge deal. But if you can, they have a storyline for it. That special is going to be more expensive, and so they're comfortable buying a higher price item knowing that it's a feel-good thing, right? People are going to remember that better. The staff has something to talk about than like the regular old menu, right? And that's sort of my last point. You can't compete with price. We don't want to compete with price. The conventional world, those are all subsidized, right? We're not meant to have food as cheap as we do, but you can compete in what you're growing, the freshness of it, and your story. Okay? Any questions about schools or restaurants? Okay. Retail. Retail is more flexible. Retail, you're buying, you can read the story, you're spending time in a grocery store, but there's less, right? There's less grocery stores than there are restaurants. So, and there's even less retailers that are willing to buy local that are independently owned, right? Sure, there's Reese's and places like that, but that's a really big conversation to get in that door. So having a story, being able to come up with cool presentations of like having your stuff on display, being willing to market yourself and have a story is a really cool opportunity. And again, having some kind of food safety certification or organic certification is really going to set you apart because that's what they're looking for. Okay. This is my new favorite, corporate wellness. It's the hot thing. So we'll quickly talk about CSAs. I don't have a bunch of background in it. CSAs is where you're gonna make the most profit, but you're gonna put in a lot of marketing work, right? You are your everything. Has anyone ever had a CSA? How was it?
More work than anything else.
Okay. Yeah, so you can control it, you're allowed to put in whatever you want in it, but at the same time, you have to have a certain personality to really make it successful. Corporate wellness is the hot new thing. Everybody wants their staff to be happy. It's a great retention. If you work for a decent sized organization, 100 plus people, or you're married to someone or your cousin knows someone, this is a really, really good option. So you can do something standalone and you can have your own little farmer's market. Once a month, you get out a couple tables and the staff gets to come down after lunch and they get to shop and you get a couple of your farmer friends all together and you have your own little farmer's market in a 75-degree conference room like this. And you're telling your story and you're saying, here's where I am. We have places that are doing this and it's so much fun and it's not a whole lot of work. So if you're interested in doing more of this, let me know. CSAs, I love them, but they're hard. Yes.
So for the corporate farmers markets, are there regulations, kind of like how a city has to file all this stuff to have a farmers market? Most people, since it's a private corporation,
Yeah.
they just say, yeah, you can come in as long as you have, obviously,
Yes.
the licensing that you need and safety and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
So we've worked with corporate farmers markets. It counts under like, you usually have to have board approval. And if they are like, so we helped OU get one. And so they're not corporate, right? So because they're state funded, they have to show equal opportunity. So there was some like, there had to be an open invitation to all farmers.
Yeah.
But so typically there's like some really basic little rules, but it's really not hard and they all want it.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest issue is getting HR to promote it.
Yeah.
So that there'll be people there, and also making sure that like I remember one time there was, you wanted it to be at noon. Well, what are you gonna do if you buy beef at noon and you go back and your little refrigerator for your whole department is like this big, and so there was like some frustration there, and so we talked about moving it to later in the day, so it's like you pick it up and then you go home.
Yeah, like a 4:30, and that's the thing is like it can be like 4:30 to 5. You can be there for 30 minutes, and now all of a sudden you have 200 people in line like shopping your stuff. So like legally and all that stuff, it's usually pretty clear. Sometimes the meat, if you're selling meat, you might have to have something else. I have done stuff like this and not done anything but no one's. Are the employees going to call the health department on me? That was kind of my idea. I didn't make it a career move, but I did it enough where I was doing it for fun and I never got in trouble for anything, So, but don't.
State rules.
No. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So, okay, and that's basically the summary of the options to sell outside of a farmer's market or outside of what you're all doing now. So does anyone have any further questions? Yes.
Given your particular expertise in Oklahoma, are you aware of any place that might be a good fit for beef, not just beef as in cuts, but we also do value-added shelf-stable sticks and things of that nature. And so that's a whole new thing that doesn't require, or is not new, but it's new in terms of thinking about marketing beef and not needing refrigeration, etc. But I love to, I'm super small, super rural, just to find somebody closer to a population center that's already being a funnel that I might be able to tap into.
So like the beef sticks, I think there's several retailers. Where are you?
I'm in Porham, so southern Muskogee County, just outside.
Okay, so there's like Okie Family Mart and like Broken Arrow. There's Salt and Soul and Coweta. There's a couple other places. There's a bunch of places in Oklahoma City, which I can help with. Does anyone else can think of like any smaller grocery store?
No, closed this week.
Oh, really? Pure and Simple Market. Yeah.
They're going to continue to do home delivery, but I don't think it's going to be scalable. The owners are looking for a new person to take over the store right now.
Okay. Bond broth, I think it's like BON with like a line on top of the O.
Are you saying broth?
Broth.
Okay.
They have a retail store that they do
Yeah.
assignment and they do wholesale purchasing for people.
Yeah.
They sell
Are they OKC or Tulsa?
They're in South Tulsa,
Yeah.
so that's a great.
Handmade by Amber's in Tulsa.
Mhm.
They do wholesale purchasing from farms,
Mhm.
retail like that.
So those are some good options.
And both startups from Tulsa
Mhm.
that were farmers market that have grown into brick and mortar stores.
You can reach out to Mother Road Market. They have a small retail area that they provide. It's like the Made in Oklahoma coalition, but they've got a decent amount of things there. What else? That was a good question.
Thanks, you guys.
Does anyone have any success stories that they want to share, like a good relationship with someone, like wholesale wise?
I don't have anything personal.
Okay.
I have a friend that's been doing this up in northern Minnesota, and she sells to the hospital, the school, the local Chimotana farm. And really, you can just, it's amazing to see the kids that are exposed to this coming in and wanting to check out the things and learning, and not only about that, but just everything.
Yeah.
It plugs them into possible mentors, which is something that I really wish people would think about, because how many children get that opportunity to go out and find out this kind of stuff and know.
I think that's a huge thing to reach out to those school districts and say, hey, not only would I like to sell you something, but depending on where your farm is, either staff come or a few kids that are interested, you going and giving a presentation to different age groups and depending on what they're doing. I mean, there's so many cool opportunities, and like one decent sized school district can buy enough stuff from a farm where, you don't want everything going to one place, right? But they have the capability of buying everything that you're growing. And that's what we've seen with a couple places where Union. So Union is how much time do we have?
We have,
141.
I don't know. I'm more what time.
It's 1:41. How long we're talking to 150?
Yeah, 150-ish, 155. We had to go to the next room by 2:05.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you guys a success story. So Union Schools in Tulsa is amazing. It's all thanks to a lady named Lisa Griffin. She's retired, but her staff is very well trained. They have committed that their produce, part of their produce bid, 20% of it has to go to local food. That is unheard of. I think they're the only ones in the state that does anything like that. But what I have been doing is going and telling all these other school districts, Union has figured it out. Sure, maybe it took 7 or 8 years for them to get this good at it, but maybe we shouldn't start with 20%, but what about 5%? 5% of for example, I pitched it to Broken Arrow schools. 5% of their produce bid could support 3 or 4 farmers. And so just thinking about that possibility of what that could look like over the next few years with that big grant opportunity. $4 million seems like a lot. It can help a ton, right? But that can also start a relationship. Union doesn't use that grant. There's no local food grants for schools right now. They're doing that as part of their regular bid. You hear how little each meal can be for a kid. They have figured it out, and they are buying stuff at high prices, and they're making it work, right? And so getting more school districts to understand that. They have a bid system where farms actually apply. They do the same thing as a distributor would. That's awesome. Schools don't have to do that, but what that does, it commits them to source local, right? Their school board, whoever their finances are going to look, and if it says it has to be 20% of our budget, they're going to make sure that they're meeting those standards, right? And so thinking about that with all the school districts that you all could be connected to, what that could do for you, and pitching that idea could be game changing. So. Okay.
I'm really excited. Are you talking about group gap?
Do you want me to? Okay, so you. I think that's, so basically, group gap, we are, this is the first time in Oklahoma we have done anything like this. We're organizing right now I think we have 23, I think our 23rd farmer just signed up to do a group USDA audit that takes the price from about $4,000 to a few $100s. We're going to have a Zoom call about it on Monday if anyone is available and wants to learn more.
Noon or 4.
And the email, if you search for Group Gap in your email, you should see that sign up.
Well, if you were already a member. If you weren't a member before this of OLAC, then you won't have received it. But
Then you can talk to her about it. So what that's going to do, not only is that going to help a ton of farms be able to get their GAP certification and really enter in the possibility of selling wholesale, is we're hoping that this organizes you all into a way to understand who's growing what and to be able to collectively say, okay, between these 6 farmers, we can grow 300 pounds of carrots a week. And we can then pitch that idea to restaurants and to schools and to help streamline things a lot better. And we also hope that if anyone's interested in organic certification, Cassie already is organic certified, is a really easy add-on. It's 2 different things, but the organization of it to get to organic is going to be much easier. Question?
I've been playing around with doing this, but like to start off, I've only, like I told myself I might try 1, maybe 2 market cards.
That's exactly what you should do.
I don't want to mess with any, yeah, but like in the past when I talked to people, they didn't want to mess with me because I was too small. But so that's okay, because what I want is somebody to say, these are what we need. This is what is needed. This is what will sell. You know, here are your mentors. Have at it.
Yeah,
So
that's perfect.
we actually had, Karen, we were talking about this for some of the certifications. So say you don't want to get a new wash station. And you just don't want, I mean, if you want to explain this, you can.
So as you get higher up in the audits, the restrictions get more and more stringent. So the capital that you need to maybe fix your wash and pack area might become too extensive. But there's only a few items that would need like an official washing standard. So you can grow certain things that you're rinsing them off. So like root vegetables and things like that. And you don't have to have maybe as much equipment.
So you can build back in. That's
Yep.
kind of what I'm looking at is what can I start with what I have now, and then build upon it.
Yeah. And so I think what Cassie's doing with, I mean, anything organic, you can do whatever you want with organic because that's incredible. And then what Elizabeth does is specializes a lot of Asian vegetables. She has little competition, right? And when someone looks at a distributor and they're looking for some fun herb or some fun vegetable, that's going to get brought in by a specialty thing and it's whatever. It's not going to be the fresh because it's like the logistics are a nightmare. And she can offer something that's local and the connection is there. So yeah, so things like that are an awesome way to start. It's fun to try everything though. I get most farmers love to have like 15 or 20 different things and that's just part of it. But for wholesale and if you're wanting to grow more, it is better to pick things that you are good at because then the volume is there and you're not trying to sell this and this and this and this. It's like, okay, here are the 6 things I have. That's why I was talking about Rod, who we were like filling up a Frontier truck with all of his stuff. He's the sweet potato guy. He's the sweet potato guy that talks a lot. So if you ever see him at any conference, you will know him. He has like 5 or 6 other things, but he leads with his sweet potatoes. That's why people buy from him. And then he says, well, I just have these extra things. So specializing, he has 4 or 5 different kinds of sweet potatoes. He's got some red ones. He's got some Japanese ones. It's pretty cool. But that is what he's known for, and then he gets to add on from there. So it's a good strategy, and it's obviously working. So, yeah.